A Florida judge just insulted Pam Bondi, on camera, in the middle of a high-profile trial. He thought he was untouchable, but minutes later, federal marshals walked in and arrested him. This isn't a movie. It's real. And what Pam Bondi did next left the entire courtroom, and the internet, speechless. Let's break it down. It was supposed to be just another day in court. Cameras rolled outside the courthouse, journalists waited for statements, and a few curious onlookers gathered in the back row. Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General, arrived with her legal team, composed and ready. She was representing a high-profile client, a wealthy businessman accused of corporate fraud involving millions of dollars, political donors, and international wire transfers. The stakes were high, but Bondi was no stranger to pressure. What no one knew, however, was that the next 30 minutes inside that courtroom would trigger a legal firestorm that would dominate headlines nationwide. Presiding over the case was Judge Alan Whitmore, a man known across Florida for his rigid courtroom demeanor. With over 2 decades on the bench, Whitmore had a reputation, sharp, commanding, and brutally honest, sometimes to a fault. Lawyers who argued before him either respected his discipline or feared his verbal takedowns. He didn't tolerate delays, theatrics, or what he considered media-friendly legal drama. From the moment Bondi entered the courtroom, something felt off. The judge didn't greet her as he did the other attorneys. He didn't even make eye contact. As the proceedings began, it quickly became clear there was tension. When Bondi rose to make a preliminary motion, Judge Whitmore cut her off mid-sentence. "Stick to the facts, Ms. Bondi. We're not here for a campaign speech," he snapped. The courtroom stirred. Was that necessary? Undeterred, Bondi continued. She laid out her opening points, citing constitutional precedent and previous rulings relevant to her client's defense. Her delivery was calm, confident, and clear, but Whitmore interrupted again. "Ms. Bondi, are you reading from a political memoir? Because that doesn't sound like legal argument to me." There was a nervous laugh from someone in the gallery, quickly silenced by the judge's glare. Bondi paused, adjusted her notes, and took a breath. The entire room could feel the rising tension. But then, it happened. She proceeded to elaborate on a key point regarding prosecutorial overreach. Before she could finish her thought, Judge Whitmore leaned in, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "Ms. Bondi, perhaps you were better at politics than law, because this argument is as weak as your resume." The room went dead silent. You could hear people shift in their seats. One junior attorney dropped his pen. A seasoned reporter in the gallery looked up from her notes, stunned. Even opposing counsel, who had every reason to be pleased, looked momentarily uncomfortable. Pam Bondi. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She looked directly at the judge, lips pressed together, calmly took her seat, and said nothing. But make no mistake, something had shifted in that moment. The insult wasn't just personal, it was public, it was unprofessional, and it was recorded. Everyone in that courtroom knew that line had crossed a boundary, and Bondi was about to make sure the consequences were swift, sharp, and unforgettable. Little did Judge Whitmore know, the real trial was about to begin, and this time, he would be the one on defense. The insult echoed like a thunderclap in the courtroom. Even in a place known for fierce legal battles and occasional verbal sparring, this moment was different. The words Judge Alan Whitmore had just spoken, essentially mocking Pam Bondi's career and legal skills, had crossed a line. It wasn't just unprofessional, it was deeply personal. And it wasn't whispered in private or passed as an offhand comment, it was said aloud, in front of an entire courtroom full of lawyers, clients, reporters, and court staff. Heads turned. Eyes widened. Veteran attorneys who had seen decades of trials were left speechless. You could practically hear the collective gasp as the judge leaned back in his chair, seemingly pleased with his remark. But what came next was something he didn't expect. Pam Bondi didn't react. She didn't argue. She didn't fumble. She didn't even raise her voice. Instead, she stared at Judge Whitmore, calm, expressionless, unshaken, and continued delivering her legal argument. Word by word, she laid out her points with laser precision. It was as if the insult had bounced off her entirely. Her voice remained steady. Her posture unshaken. If anything, she seemed focused. Almost strategic. That's when the energy in the room began to shift. Judge Whitmore, who had likely expected an emotional response, perhaps even an outburst, suddenly looked unsettled. He fidgeted slightly in his chair. He flipped through papers that didn't need flipping. He interrupted her one final time, but this time, it felt hollow, like a man trying to regain control that was slipping through his fingers. Pam Bondi finished her statement, turned to the bench, and politely said, "Thank you, Your Honor." Then she walked back to her seat and sat down. For a moment, the courtroom was silent again. It felt like the storm had passed. But in reality, it had just begun. What no one in that room realized was that Bondi wasn't finished. She was just getting started. Within minutes of sitting down, one of her aides leaned in. There was a quiet exchange. Then two members of her legal team stood up and exited the courtroom through a side door, their faces serious, their pace brisk. No one thought much of it, perhaps they were reviewing evidence or taking a quick call. But outside, behind closed doors, Pam Bondi's team wasn't talking about the trial anymore. They were making calls, serious ones. One went to the office of the Inspector General for Judicial Conduct. Another went directly to a contact within the U.S. Marshal's office. Bondi had come to court prepared to defend her client, but what she also brought were documents, emails, and quietly gathered statements regarding Judge Alan Whitmore's history of misconduct. This wasn't reaction. This was execution. Bondi didn't just want an apology, she wanted accountability. And what was about to happen next would make legal history, because the next person facing scrutiny wouldn't be a businessman in a suit, it would be the judge himself. Behind her calm demeanor, Pam Bondi had just activated a political and legal network that few people knew she still commanded. While many saw her as a former public servant turned legal analyst, insiders knew better. Pam Bondi still held serious sway, both in the state of Florida and on a federal level. And now, she was using it with surgical precision. Unbeknownst to most in that courtroom, Bondi had already been preparing for something like this. Days before the trial, whispers had started coming her way, quiet tips from within the legal community, former court clerks, and even a retired judge. The message was clear: Judge Alan Whitmore had a pattern. A pattern of bias, personal vendettas, and behind-the-scenes misconduct, especially when it came to lawyers with political backgrounds. Pam Bondi had been warned he might try to humiliate her in court. And instead of simply bracing for it, she did what smart attorneys do best: she documented everything. She came to court not only with legal briefs but with a sealed folder full of ammunition, including emails from past court clerks detailing inappropriate comments, recorded audio from chambers where the judge allegedly disparaged political figures, and two sworn affidavits accusing him of case tampering and unethical communications with prosecutors. So when the insult was made, Bondi didn't react emotionally, because the real response was already in motion. She stepped outside and placed two phone calls. The first went to the office of the Inspector General for Judicial Conduct, where she submitted an emergency complaint backed by detailed evidence. The second went to a contact in the U.S. Marshal's office, a trusted ally from her time as Attorney General. Her message was simple: we have a sitting judge abusing his authority in real time. And I have the proof. Her legal team moved quickly. Emails were forwarded, documents scanned, recordings uploaded to a secure government server. It was a blitz. Bondi didn't want revenge, she wanted accountability. And she was about to get it. Exactly 20 minutes later, the doors to the courtroom swung open. Two U.S. Marshals, tall, serious, and in full uniform, stepped inside. Behind them, Bondi's legal team returned to their seats without a word. The courtroom, once bustling with whispers and legal arguments, fell dead silent. All eyes turned to the front as the marshals slowly made their way toward the bench. Judge Whitmore, mid-sentence, looked up, and froze. The color drained from his face. His voice cracked as he asked, "Can I help you, gentlemen?" One of the marshals pulled a folded document from his vest and said, in a calm, commanding tone, "Judge Whitmore, you are being placed under federal investigation. We are here to escort you from the bench pending further review of misconduct allegations." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. It was as if time had stopped. Attorneys stared wide-eyed. The defendant's jaw dropped. Court reporters paused mid-typing. And Pam Bondi? She didn't even look surprised. She just folded her hands, and waited. The judge had insulted her resume. But now he was about to become a headline, and a warning, for every official who thought power made them untouchable. "Judge Whitmore," the U.S. Marshal repeated, his voice calm but firm, "you are being placed under arrest pending investigation into allegations of judicial misconduct and abuse of authority. Please step down from the bench." At first, there was stunned silence, a moment where time seemed to freeze. Then, like the rip of a curtain, the courtroom exploded into chaos. Lawyers stood up in disbelief, some with mouths agape, others whispering furiously to one another. Several reporters who had been sitting quietly in the gallery jumped to their feet, cameras in hand, capturing every second of what was quickly becoming the biggest legal scandal of the year. Phones were out. Video rolled. In real time, the takedown of a sitting judge was being documented from every angle. Judge Alan Whitmore, once the picture of control and authority, was now visibly shaken. His face, flushed a deep red, twisted into disbelief and panic. He stammered, "There must be some mistake, I am the judge here." "You can't." But the lead marshal calmly interrupted. "Sir, we have authority under federal jurisdiction. We're asking you to cooperate." The judge looked around as if someone might step in to stop it, but no one moved. Not even his own clerks. In fact, most looked down, unwilling to meet his gaze. This wasn't just an arrest, it was a reckoning. With slow, tense movements, Judge Whitmore stepped down from the bench. He was not cuffed, not yet, but he was escorted firmly and without delay, right past the rows of stunned attorneys, past his staff, and past a now silent defendant, who stared as if he couldn't believe what was happening. As the judge disappeared through the rear courtroom doors, flanked by the marshals, you could hear the sound of shutters clicking and keyboards firing off breaking headlines. Federal judge escorted out of courtroom in middle of trial. Bondi's silent power move ends in arrest. Judicial bombshell rocks Florida court system. And amid all the noise, there was Pam Bondi, sitting quietly at the defense table. Calm. Still. Eyes forward. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't celebrate. She simply watched, as if she had seen it all coming. She picked up her pen, jotted a few notes, and handed them to her associate. No drama. No emotion. Just precision. It wasn't until hours later, after the video of the arrest had gone viral on social media and news networks began looping the clip with dramatic headlines, that Bondi issued a statement to the press. It was short, powerful, and direct. No one is above the law. Not even those who wear the robe. That one sentence sent shockwaves through the legal world. It was quoted in op-eds, featured on nightly news, and reposted by politicians, lawyers, and activists alike. This wasn't just about a personal insult anymore. This was about justice turning its eye on itself. And Pam Bondi? She had just reminded the world exactly who she was, and exactly what she was capable of. Judge Alan Whitmore, once seen as untouchable, is now at the center of a growing scandal. As of this recording, he remains under federal investigation for judicial misconduct and abuse of authority. And the more investigators dig, the darker the picture becomes. Early reports suggest that internal emails obtained during the preliminary probe revealed deeply unprofessional, and possibly unethical, behavior. Whitmore allegedly made derogatory comments about several attorneys, including those involved in politically sensitive cases. Even more alarming, some of his emails suggest coordination with prosecutors in cases where neutrality should have been sacrosanct. One email, flagged by investigators, hinted at manipulating case calendars to pressure defense teams. Another reportedly discussed getting rid of evidence motions before they could be heard in court. As a result, multiple past rulings, including high-profile cases involving corporate fraud and political corruption, are now under review. Legal experts say that if even a portion of these allegations are substantiated, Judge Whitmore could face permanent disbarment, loss of pension, and even criminal charges. Meanwhile, Pam Bondi is being hailed as a symbol of both courage and control. In a political climate where shouting matches and viral soundbites often define leadership, Bondi's measured, calm, and strategic response has earned praise across party lines. Liberal and conservative legal analysts alike have applauded her actions, calling them a masterclass in accountability and a moment that redefined professional composure under fire. She didn't retaliate emotionally. She didn't grandstand. She simply gathered the facts, made her move quietly, and let the truth speak for itself, and that's what made it powerful. Some are calling it a blueprint for how to confront power the right way, with evidence, integrity, and nerves of steel. As former prosecutor Lisa DeMarco put it, Bondi didn't just defend her client, she defended the integrity of the entire justice system. But as the dust settles, a bigger and more uncomfortable question begins to rise. How many judges are misusing their power, and getting away with it? How many attorneys are afraid to challenge authority for fear of retaliation or career damage? Pam Bondi wasn't afraid. She knew her worth, she knew the law, and more importantly, she knew when to draw the line. In a profession where silence often protects the powerful, she broke that silence with precision. And in doing so, she reminded the world of something too often forgotten. Justice isn't just about verdicts, it's about courage. O Utero, call to action. So now we want to hear from you. Was this a boss move by Pam Bondi? Or was it simply an overdue reckoning for a man who thought the robe made him untouchable? Drop your thoughts in the comments, we're reading every single one. And if you believe justice should be fair, transparent, and accountable, smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that matters. This was one for the history books. And trust us, we're just getting started.